Now, since we already have a general understanding of what the law is, I won't waste time talking about that. Let's focus on what death is. So here's how Romans 5:12 puts it. It says, here is how it works. It was through one individual that sin entered the world, and through sin, death. And in this way, death passed through to the whole human race, inasmuch as everyone sinned. Sin was indeed present in the world before Torah was given, but sin is not counted as such when there is no Torah. Nevertheless, death ruled from Adam until Moshe. That's an important thing to notice. Death ruled. Even over those whose sinning was not exactly like Adam's violation of a direct command. In this, Adam prefigured the one who was to come. Okay, so we see that death clearly is some form of power or force because it has the ability to rule. So in order for it to rule, it must have some power with which to rule from. And we see that death ruled from the time of Adam all the way to the time of Moses, which is very interesting because that suggests that death was the ruler up until the time of the law, and then it seems that maybe the law took its place. But that's just a side note. Let's keep going. Romans 6:9, it says, we know that the Messiah has been raised from the dead, never to die again. Death has no authority over him. Now, so that's interesting. So the first verse seems to indicate that death is a power of some kind. And now here it's telling us that it must have authority, because in order for it not to have authority over the Messiah, means it must have authority over something else, which namely would be us. But let's check one more. Revelation 20:14 says, then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. Now that's super interesting because that seems to infer some type of sentience to this power or this force that we call death. Now, this is where you probably have to start getting into your Greek and Hebrew and getting much deeper into the definitions than I'm going to right now. So let's just again keep this kind of surface level. I think what we've learned here is that at the very least, death is a power. That's probably one of the most important things we have to take away. There is some type of power that death has, and that power also carries with it some type of authority. Now, power, generally speaking, does not have any type of operational value until it is granted to somebody who is going to then execute or utilize that power. And so the question is, whose power is death? Well, in Hebrews 2:14, it says, therefore, since the children share a common physical nature as human beings, he became like them and shared that same human nature, so that by his death he might render ineffective the one who had power over death, that is, the adversary, and thus set free those who had been in bondage all their lives because of their fear of death. Now, isn't that interesting? So what we learn is that death is a power. We learn that there is a person who has control or dominion over that power, or had anyway. We don't know that he still does. I think actually that was reversed in Christ. But neither here nor there. Satan had power over death, and more specifically, the way that power kept us in bondage was because of our fear of death. Which takes us all the way back to 1 Corinthians 15:56, where it says, the sting of death is sin, and sin draws its power from the Torah. So then, how does Satan rule us? So Satan's goal is to control us. The way he controls us is by the fact that there is this thing called death. Death is the bondage that we are trapped in because we're in physical bodies that are going to die, right? And so we are in bondage to death. We cannot escape it as long as we are trapped in these material bodies. The fear of that death is the way that Satan controls us. But specifically, he does it through poisoning us with sin. So that's the sting of death, right? And the sin, the poison, the reason that we're susceptible to that poison is that there is a law that condemns us to death. And so the sin poisons us by bringing us under accusation from the law, which allows Satan to legally claim us with death. And so put more simplistically, as long as we are susceptible to die, right? As long as we can die, then we are susceptible to the fear of death. Example being, if I couldn't die, then I wouldn't be afraid of heights, right? I could go as high as I want to and never have any type of fear because I have no fear of dying if I were to fall. What that means is that my behaviors are dictated in the world by my fear of death. There are certain decisions that I make, things that I do and don't do, things that I do eat and don't eat, as a result of the fact that if I do certain things, it could kill me. And so because I am afraid of dying, that dictates or manipulates the behaviors. Now, you could carry that out to a greater extreme and say, okay, what happens if my family is starving and I'm starving, and I don't see any other way in order to feed them outside of stealing? And so what do? Well, because of my fear of death, my behaviors can be manipulated where a person could come in and say, Satan, for example, could say, if you don't steal, you're going to die. And so, because of my fear of death, he is able to manipulate my behavior to then sin. Then, once I have sinned, I now become guilty under the law. And so, using the law, he is then able to persuade me that I'm cut off from God because I violated the law. And if I am cut off from God, then who has to take care of me? God or me? I do. And if I have to be reliant on myself to take care of myself because I'm afraid of death, and now because I've sinned, I've now been rendered guilty under the law, which means I can't trust God to take care of me because I'm cut off from him by sin and by the law. And so now, as an orphan, Satan can feed me all types of methods to take care of myself that are in violation of the way in which God has provided, because I can't trust God to take care of me because Satan's persuaded me that I'm cut off from God. Now, how do we know this is true? Because it says it right here in Romans 7:7. It says, therefore, what are we to say? That the Torah is sinful? Heaven forbid. Rather, the function of the Torah was that without it, I would not have known what sin is. For example, I would not have become conscious of what greed is if the Torah had not said, thou shalt not covet. But sin, seizing the opportunity afforded by the commandment, worked in me all kinds of evil desires. For apart from the Torah, sin is dead. I was once alive outside the framework of Torah, but when the commandment really encountered me, sin sprang to life and I died. The commandment that was intended to bring me life was found to be bringing me death.